This episode is brought to you by Nespresso and Samra Origins by the Weekend Coffee Collection.
Introducing Samra Origins. My collaboration with Nespresso is a connection to my roots, to my mother, Samra. Coffee that hits the right notes. It transports you. Crafted with unique notes and bold, soaring flavors. Experience a taste that moves you. Nespresso and Samra Origins.
Discover more at Nespresso.com.
Round 15 of the URC was played against a backdrop of a crazy week of news in Irish rugby, and we learned there is a new Grand Slam as one South African franchise completed a clean sweep in the season against all of the Irish provinces. We'll be deep diving that and so much more in this week's episode. Let's start the show.
You're listening to United Rugby Rewind.
Welcome back, everybody. I am joined this week by Muhammed, New Muhammed, as he'll be known for at least the interim. Good evening, Muhammed. Good afternoon, Muhammed.
Good evening.
And I'm joined by Caolan. This Caolan, no, that Caolan.
Yes, that Caolan is back amongst ye after avoiding YouTube comments for a week now. I am back and I am feeling refreshed. The weather is nice. There's Easter eggs over there in the other corner of the room. Sure, we're grand. This is fine.
Absolutely. Well, unfortunately, we're going to reopen the wounds and dive straight in as we review Munster versus Bulls, the kind of the big ticket game of the weekend. I think the most talked about game of the weekend. Of course, all of them we're talking about because it's the URC and we talk about it all the time. But let's start with this one. So, Mohammed, I'm going to come to you first because you are the South African voice and the South African team won this game. What did you make of the Bulls' performance, securing the Grand Slam over the Irish teams and a rare win away in Munster?
Well, it's quite interesting because I wasn't actually aware that they had actually beaten all the Irish provinces this season. So good for them. This is their third week on tour because they had two Challenge Cup games and now they've got this URC game. And then next week they're in Scotland. So I figure they're probably going to lose that one because they're alternating them. They managed the game quite well. Towards the end, they seem to be trying to lose, but obviously the issues with the referee misinterpreting the laws and putting them down to putting Munster down to 14 men certainly played in the Bulls' favor. Effectively, what the Bulls are doing is that they've taken this team on tour and they've keep reshuffling the players they have, and they do have quality players. So I will say that replacement fly off / scrum off, Johannes, he played quite well towards the end, even though he did miss a 3-pointer. Yeah, the Bulls back and forth. Hanekom had a slightly better game. It wasn't that Munster were bad, it's that the Bulls sort of rode their luck to an extent. And you could see by their reaction at the end of the game that they were very stoked to have actually taken a win in a game that they were rightfully sort of underdogs. So good for them.
Yeah, Jake White, I think, is a coach who loves to make a long plan. He likes to make a plan, and he likes to lay a plot over several weeks for a specific game. I think we saw from his selection in this game that he wasn't really taking the Challenge Cup seriously when he saw the players he brought back in for this one. This is, I think, the strongest Bulls team I've seen for a good while. And the way he spoke about it after the game, it does seem like that this was a long-term plot, a long-term game that he targeted. And I get the sense that he gets a kick out of that he enjoys kind of seeing a plan come together. Mohammed, what do you think is the feeling with Jake now? Because there was a point in the season where things were going a bit iffy for the Bulls, and Bulls fans were starting to ask, is it time that we tried something else? He's been in here for a while. Is the team not moving forward, or has he silenced those critics now?
Jake White's always going to be somewhat of a firebrand. He's got his own way of doing things and sort of making certain statements to purposefully sort of misdirect and that kind of thing. I personally think that he's a solid manager / coach. I think they're lucky to have him. And their recruitment and sort of focus has been quite good, even though I could sort of criticize, like last week, their depth at fly off. Even when he was at the Sharks, people were saying, well, we're not playing very entertaining rugby, but we were winning. And as a Sharks supporter, I did not care that it might not have been the most flash, but we were getting results, and that was what was keeping us happy. Jake White, So obviously got the experience. Um, he has his methods have sort of evolved, and there's a there's a degree of quality when you get a coach that's coached at so many different places in France and Australia. People forget that he was at the Brumbies. Um, yeah, unless they get like what's the South African coach at the in Scotland? Unless they get him, I can't really
Franco
see an
Smith.
upgrade. Yeah, Franco Smith, whose son is breaking into the Sharks team right now. Um, Unless they get him, I can't see an upgrade. So it'll be either a downward move or a lateral movement. Of course, there's also Jimmy Stonehouse at the Pumas, the Ailing Pumas. He's been sort of in the periphery for a franchise job for a while. So other than Franco Smith and Jimmy Stonehouse, I can't really see who they would recruit. Um, yeah, if I were them, I'd stick with Jake White for now.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. Caolan, from your point of view as a Munster fan, tough loss to take. We spoke last week about when we were previewing this game about the hangover from the European tour that you guys had been on and how this was going to be a little bit after the Lord Mayor's show. Do you think that there was an element of emotionally not being there for this game, or are you going to tell me that there was something else to it?
I don't know. I think this is my big concern coming into this was Munster played Glasgow the week after the Six Nations finished. That went down to the last play of the game. Played Connacht the week after, last play of the game. La Rochelle, last play of the game. Bordeaux game was still a contest with 2.5 minutes to go. And three of those teams are, I wouldn't say Glasgow are a bigger pack than Munster, but they're a punchy pack. So three of those sides are going to try and run over you and beat you up a bit. And we started to see it in Munster's legs, especially as that game went on. Obviously, being forced to play with 14 men for something that you shouldn't have is, look, we can get into that if you want. We don't have to get into it if you don't want to.
Well,
That's
just
what's going to be a factor.
instead of passing comment on it, let's just explain what happened. Because when I saw all of the chat about this on socials, I assumed there'd been a red card that was incorrect, and that's not
Red
what
card
happens.
would have been correct to lose the man. So the way it is, first player that went off was Ollie Jaeger, tight head prop. He went off with HIA. They confirmed that he failed that HIA. In that instance, if his replacement, because front row, you have to be specified, you can play loose, tight, and hooker, or two, or one, whatever it might be. If in that instance his replacement, which was Stephen Archer, was to go off injured, Munster were allowed to replace him, but with uncontested scrums. That is absolutely fine. The confusion arose where, as far as we can tell, they either didn't think Stephen Archer's injury was legit, as Stephen Archer is expected to miss next week, which is unfortunate as well, or they hadn't gotten confirmation that Ollie Jaeger had suffered a HIA, or the worst case scenario, they didn't know the law and they thought Munster had to be Dr. Mann. Munster took off Alex Candellin, and that's when it got murky. It took 15 minutes to resolve. Sorry, it took 16 minutes to resolve, which it's one of those things that the rubric is there. You know, I I'm not great at looking up the word rugby law passport thing. I'm let's just doesn't mesh in my brain, but I was able to text someone who straight away had it sent on to me and I put it up on Twitter. I'd say only about 4 or 5 phases after Munster went down to 14 men. So this is where the annoyance will pop up, and rightly so. We don't want to see the player safety element of our game and frameworks are in place to improve player safety be undermined or to be, gone through wrong. There's a framework there for a reason. Ultimately, Munster should not have been forced to play with 14 men for any period. There was an apology from the URC and from the referee since the game. And I don't think it had a very direct impact on the loss. But as I have probably said on this podcast before, and I've said to friends and family loads of times, rugby is a sport that nothing happens in isolation. Munster being down to 14 men with a forward, a number eight, in a game where it's pissing rain and the Bulls are quite a big team and you're already out on your feet from the last couple of weeks, it's certainly a factor. Was it the losing of the game? Probably not. Munster's lineout was a big issue. Obviously, the conditions, the Bulls got their kicking game right. There was over 70 kicks in play in this game. It was quite a kick fest in the conditions. But they can feel aggrieved. It was a 3-point game, and ultimately, yellow card periods are typically worth about 7 points to a team. So if you lose a player for 15 minutes, and it finishes level, you're actually doing quite well. So frustrating, but I do think the Bulls were the deserved victors. I think if Munster had snatched a draw at the end, I don't think either team could have complained really. It was just a pretty even game. Stats wise, you could see, the Bulls going very defensive focus, Munster having to kind of apply a little bit more pressure and not really succeeding, which you can kind of tell in the numbers. Pretty even, but Munster's lineout is the big one again. It's just a case of Alex Codling is not there. It boils back to the fact that they had to change coach mid-season, including Andy Kiriakou, who was lineout coach, and a trickle-down effect from there. But I've said it before, this is what happens in rugby. Like, again, nothing happens in isolation. If there's a worse time to replace a coach, it's probably the season after a World Cup. The first full season after World Cup where almost everyone is in their jobs if they deserve it, that kind of way. So, look, these things happen. It won't be the case next year, I fully believe. I am under the impression that Alex Codling, the Ireland women's coach, the former Newcastle and Quins and England coach, will get that line-out job or set-piece coach job. And I think he'll do a great job, but ultimately he wasn't there. It was an issue. And yeah, like I don't think Munster were bad. I don't think the Bulls were brilliant. Cameron Hanekom again impressed me. I think he's such a good player. Keenan Moody is really big man, like deceptively large. Wilco Low is just round, and I mean that in the best way possible.
His calves. Harry Jones posted a
Yeah,
video of him
that's
just walking around on the captain's run, and like all of him's big, but it was the
all of them.
definition of his calves. They were like a dodecahedron. I didn't know they had a thing could have so many
Tree
sides.
trunks. Tree trunks would be impressed by Wilco Low and his physique. But yeah, it was a strange game, and it was a very Munster game in some ways, and in some ways a very Bulls game as well. I think there are two teams that do serve up really interesting matchups for some reason. I don't know. But yeah, this disappointing one for Munster. Top four hopes are gone now. They're 10 points behind the Sharks with 2 games left, and the Sharks or sorry, 3 games left, and the Sharks have 2 of them at home. So it's as good as gone. But now it's just about top 8, which is the frustrating part because I would have backed Munster to make a run for top 4, but this is the game they had to win, and yeah, that's sport, isn't it?
Yeah, we'll look back on the season. Obviously, after it's finished, we'll probably do a look back pod at some point. But I've not felt that a Munster have really been at the races compared to where they were last season, where they obviously finished top of the log. I never thought that they were close to repeating that during this season, unfortunately. But that's a conversation for another day. The conversation that we're going to have now today is about Stormers versus Connacht. Now, if you'd told me that that would be second on the running order this episode, I would have said, "Really? How come?" But what a game of rugby that we were subjected to. So we don't just need to talk about what we saw on TV because Mohammed was there in person. So Mohammed, before we talk about the game, tell us about your time at Cape Town Stadium.
Yeah, DHL Cape Town Stadium was really fun. I hadn't been there in a while. Atmosphere was great. Might not have been a sellout, but they only sold the seats in the lower section, and even those were not entirely full, but still mostly full.
I'm
Lots
trying
of
to
Connacht
find it.
fans.
I'm trying to find it now because
Yeah.
Stormers
Mhm.
generally bring 20,000 plus in.
Mm. Mhm.
I think they are one of the best, if not the best attended team in the URC.
Mm. So what was the attendance for this
I don't
game?
know. I'm trying to find it.
Because it was really awesome. It was a lot of fun. There were a lot of people with just Irish shirts on as opposed to just Connacht shirts. There was a section with Connacht fans traveling. And it was a very back and forth game. Yeah, the atmosphere was good. The food was good. Um, Shout out to like my Jets food there at the stadium. It's a really world-class stadium, and the fact that we got tickets from the Stormers media team who were kind enough to provide us with those. Shout out to Robbie Gillette as well. He's also got a YouTube page. We were somewhat sort of to the right of the poles, but the interesting thing about that stadium is that there aren't necessarily bad seats. All the seats have a different sort of atmosphere and things like that. Whereas opposed to sort of Newlands Stadium back in the day, I think Newlands actually did have 1 or 2 seats that weren't that ideal. Funny enough, my background is a picture I took at the
Oh,
junior
in Newlands.
junior
Oh,
World
cool.
Cup when the Baby Box beat New Zealand in that final. So you can see on my left shoulder there's all Jan Serfontein. And yeah, so Newlands was pretty cool, atmospheric, and people were obviously freaking out that they were moving from Newlands to Cape Town Stadium. There were certain concerns about like what would it be like and sort of the historic nature of Newlands. But I must say, like Cape Town Stadium being like a 2010 football stadium,
Yeah.
all these years later, it's still like really cool to go to. Um, like the way you use sort of a digital ticket, that was pretty smooth. The people around you are great, and like people are really engaged by the thing. Every time, although it's very distinct that there are like favorite players within the Stormers setup, because people slightly cheer and sort of do their own thing when the PR announcement and or a set player touches the ball or gets near to the ball. But if Shasha Feinberg, Ngomzulu, or Damien Willemse somehow get the ball, the stadium sort of erupts. So it's a very it's definitely a lot more fun than I remember it being because it's like a communal atmosphere. So and then obviously for me who likes rugby, you can watch sort of the backline set up for defensive structures and that type of thing. So that was fun, yeah. But
Awesome.
as it relates to the game though,
Yeah,
that was
well,
also
let's talk about the game. Before, I guess the thing that you almost need to talk about before the game is Sasha Feinberg and Gomezulu. So I've had it confirmed to me direct by Opta today that it's the first hat trick scored in the URC by a fly half since Reece Patchell for Cardiff, as they were then Blues, against Zebra in 2015.
Oh.
So 10 years it's been since a fly half scored a hat trick in the URC. And my goodness, the first half highlights alone that Sasha put in, beyond the highlight reels, what most players will put in over a whole season. So, Mohammed, talk to me about this guy. I've not heard you speak
yeah.
about him yet.
Yeah, it's very much like he's our Henry Pollock, but on steroids. So he's really taken
Not
up the
literally,
mantle.
not literally. Just need to
Yeah,
clarify
figuratively.
that.
Yeah. I think he's sort of taken up the mantle from Damien Willemse, who was sort of the poster boy before him, and they're both still in the team. And it's just so cool to have such dynamic sort of backline players like Wandile Simelane, Sacha Zulu, Damien Willemse, as well as Mane Libok, who's unfortunately injured at the moment. So yeah, look, he broke into the Stormers team and played really well. He was more sort of like a squad player. Clearly, from my perspective, they were sort of managing him as a young player, especially in terms of size of the players you're going to come across in the URC. And when he broke into the Springbok team, he like blossomed even more. He arguably played better for the Springboks than he did for the Stormers, and he played well for the Stormers.
I
So
think
this guy's
his game
definitely,
against Australia in last year's Rugby Championship was his first time playing a senior game at fly half, and he
Mhm,
was like the best player on the pitch.
yeah. And he's said quite publicly that he'd prefer to play 10 as opposed to 12 and or like 15. And it's also good to have somebody who can fit in here and there. I think Rassi Erasmus definitely enjoys that, or at least appreciates that. So yeah, look, it's good to have somebody who can play that confidently, also can take place kicks to that extent accurately and kick really, really far. Because we have like lots of people who can take place kicks, but like as we'll talk about the Sharks game later, it seems like maybe Jordan Hendricks kicks more accurately further away, whereas Sashvamba Gumzulu is putting people in the stadium because it's like the cult of him is growing. And yeah, I think the Stormers are incredibly lucky to have him. Of course, when he initially broke through to the team, there was obviously standard speculation because he's also got English citizenship, so he could have played for England. But yeah,
He
I
played
think
for Llandovery College in West Wales as well.
wow, that's cool. I wasn't unaware. And yeah, he's quite a big kid. He moves quite well, and his variation at fly off is very good. Um, Stormers are lucky to have him. I'm sure not just the South African franchises, but like um, rugby clubs in general are quite envious of what they have there.
Well, I did a stats drop for him, which I haven't done in a while because the WRU completely ripped off my stats drop format. So I retired from doing it. But I did one, I brought it back for Sasha, and it's the most medals. I put a medal for the one but if it was the top in the game, and it's the most medals that I've ever put against anything. The only interesting one is he only put in 6 passes as a fly half. Both Damien Willemse and Caolan passed the ball more than him, which I thought was interesting. But if you look at the stats, like on the URC website, like the stats for this game are hilarious, and we'll talk about Connacht in a minute. But like attacking stats, 12 clean breaks to 11, 25 to beat defenders beaten to 23. Defense was optional, and John Dobson made it quite clear after the game that he wasn't happy with the defensive effort. But if you look at the player stats, like top of everything is Sasha. Like what a performance, and just it's a pleasure to watch him. But Caolan, let's talk a bit about Connacht now. So the game itself. 34 points to 29. Connacht with the try ruled out in overtime for crossing, which I think was the correct decision. But we were saying last week that Connacht season was over and out, and yet they've come close to what would have been a famous result here.
Yeah, I know it would have. Surprisingly, the Stormers feel like the South African team that the Irish teams do well against. Maybe it's because they have this ability to just let you back into games, like at an unprecedented level. This was a game the Stormers probably should have had wrapped up after 20 minutes, and probably should have wrapped up with 20 minutes to go as well, but kept giving Connacht opportunities. Shane Jennings with 2 tries, he topped a lot of the charts from a Connacht perspective. Jack Carthy got the backline moving, forward was good, and the pack really stood up, but I still wouldn't be Easter joke here. I wouldn't be resurrecting Connacht's season chances just yet, because they still have to go to Joburg next week, go to altitude. They have won there before, but it's a lot trickier than it was. Like it feels like going to play the Lions gets harder and harder every year as the URC has gone on, if you ask me. So yeah, no, it's a good result for them in terms of look at who they didn't have. Matt Hansen, Bundiaki, JJ Hanran, Josh Ioane, Dennis Buckley, Keela Blade wasn't there, and so forth. Seamus Hurley Langton didn't feature in this one. And I feel like I'm missing someone obvious. Maybe not. So they were without quite a few players. Shea Bolton was the other one I was thinking of. And yet they got 2 points here. Probably should have been the full five. They will be disappointed. I think the disallowed try is one thing. I do think as well it was a correct decision. But just before that, they had an opportunity. Jack Ainger has probably like a one-on-one close to the line. If he can just hold on to that pass from, I think it was Divine, I'm not 100% sure. He probably scores there. He's brilliant from close range. Pass slips out of his hands, and Connacht ultimately don't score from a brilliant opportunity, brilliant 22 entry by, can't remember who it was now actually, who made the initial break, but yeah, a good performance. And Connacht have also had a turbulent week. I know we'll get onto the IRFU stuff a little bit later on when we talk about Leinster Ulster. They've had a turbulent week. Pete Wilkins has officially stepped down. And I did say there was a chance that coming down here to South Africa will just free them up, because season's done. Let's just go out there and play and just perform and put your hand up for Ireland selection, but don't kind of worry. I think we kind of seen that from Connacht. I think if this is a game maybe 2 weeks ago with the season on the line, they arguably go back into their shells a bit. That they didn't actually do that in this game, and that was really impressive. And that's what you want to see. You want to see these tours to be this kind of uplifting factor. There's so much bad press about the South African tours, but they're actually really good. If you ask any Northern Hemisphere, like URC Northern Hemisphere team, they're like, yeah, they're a great chance for the lads to
The
stick
big
together.
misconception about them is, and what you'll hear on a podcast such as Rugby Union Weekly, is that they'll say, "Yo, you're getting on a plane to South Africa every other week." Factually incorrect and a ridiculous claim to make.
Once this season, twice.
You go on a 2 week tour, which is probably more like 10 days in real life, down to South Africa, play 2 games and come back up again. So that's 10 days out of a 365-day year. You are down in South Africa. So
Going
yeah,
to lovely cities, different culture. It's
going
horrible.
on
Like
safari.
these poor athletes,
Yeah,
it's. I hate to be that guy, but like sometimes you do have to ask pundits, like, what do you want about? Like most
yeah.
people, if they got a chance for work to go to a really nice place once a year for 10 days, they take it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, need to move on now to talk about Judgment Day. Before we do, if you're enjoying the conversation so far, please consider subscribing to the channel. We had a great week last week and we're hoping to repeat that again this week. Remember, it's also audio format, so if you want to catch us on Spotify, you can do that if this is a bit too long for your YouTube viewing. And if you do listen on Spotify, make sure to give us a 5-star review and share a link with a friend to help us grow the channel. Really appreciate it. Okay, let's talk about Judgment Day now. So, like Mohammed, I was also at a game. I also met up with former South African voice on this show. I met up with South African Alan and his lovely wife. Were there, courtesy of producer Lee, who got a load of people tickets to the big event. So, for people who don't know, Judgment Day is the big double header. There's two derbies played back to back at the Principality Stadium in Cardiff. Now, there's been lots of chat about it. Basically, well, where Welsh rugby is now, if anything happens, people say it's rubbish. And that's just kind of the vibe at the moment. So people are saying that this shouldn't happen anymore. The big kind of reason for that is that only 28,000 people attended, whereas 10 years ago, 68,000 people attended. Still, the record attendance for a single game in the URC was Judgment Day until Leinster versus Munster Croke Park this season. So it's still the second biggest, and 68,000, I think, in 2016. So 28,000 now is obviously a big step down. But my retort to that is clearly there are people who would go to this. There's just a reason they're not coming anymore. And once we solve that reason, they will come back again. So for me, Judgment Day is something that has to happen. And I think all of the coaches and all the players who were asked about it after the event was said, yes, this is the kind of thing that we need to have. And it can work. It does work. We've shown that it worked in the past. It's not working at the moment, so we need to fix it. And we won't go into all the reasons about how we fix it because that's a story for another pod. But the best thing about it for me was to be able to go to Tiny Rebel in Cardiff, just outside the Principality Stadium, and stand around a table with Dragons fans, Scarlets fans, Ospreys fans, Cardiff fans, all around the same table and have a chat. That was the best thing about it for me. That's what I enjoyed about the day. The first game between Cardiff and Ospreys, I thought was a fun enough game. Obviously, that was the one that I was neutral for, and it was enjoyable. You know, obviously, Cardiff have had the emotional couple of weeks of having been taken over by the WRU after going into administration, and they Judgment Day, they have a decent record over the Ospreys. If they play the Ospreys at Cap or at Swansea, the Ospreys tend to do a job over them, but at the Principality, for some reason, they get the better of them. It was 6 tries to 3. I have to say it's the best defensive performance I've seen Cardiff put in, maybe in Matt Sherratt's tenure so far. And Teddy Williams, what a performance from him. Like he is really starting to ask questions of why aren't I starting for Wales? Because he's been the form second row of any kind of Welsh heritage for a good year now. So yeah, good win for Cardiff, really helping themselves get a stronger grip on that playoff space. It'd be great to see a Welsh team in the Champions Cup next year as well. That's the other side of the race for 8 for me. And a hat-trick for Gabriel Hamer-Webb from this brilliant try off the receipt. Ospreys, I think, can be disappointed by how blunt they looked in this game. They had a man advantage for 10 minutes in the second half, and they had all the possession in Cardiff's 22, it felt like, and only got 1 try. It was a bit of a throwback whether the new manager bounce from Mark Jones taking over from Toby Booth is kind of worn off. I don't know. Speaking to Ospreys fans, speaking to Nick, shout out Nick, who will answer your question for Caolan a bit later in the show. He was saying that since Mark Jones has gone from defense coach to head coach, the defense of the Ospreys has suffered, which you would expect. That's natural. And I think the Ospreys have conceded 30 plus points 4 games in a row now, which is not great. But yeah, brilliant win for the Blue and Blacks who wear red. Caolan, you also caught a fair bit of this one. What was your take on it as a non-Welsh fan?
I enjoyed it. Now, I'm a little bit, I don't think bias is the right word. I was chatting to a friend of mine during the week who has been at a Judgment Day game. I think it was that really well sold out one, like the 68,000 one, and he absolutely loved it. Like, and a Munster fan like myself, absolutely thoroughly enjoyed it. I only caught bits of this because when I got back after the Munster match, having been at it, we were all at games this weekend. We kind of forgot to mention that. Um, when I got back after that, it was on Premiere, and I just kind of stuck it on in the background while I was doing a few bits, and it was fun. Cardiff are generally an enjoyable team to watch, and the Ospreys have become an enjoyable team to watch, as you said, in recent weeks. Got off to a fast start, but Cardiff, to their credit, they look like a top 8 team this year. And we did say at the start of the season, regardless of who it was, if we could just see a Welsh team in the quarterfinals again, it would be a good place to be just before the budgets get raised again. Obviously, stuff has happened with Cardiff, as you said, with the WRU taking control for them for well, at least for the time being. But no, a decent game. Didn't have enough an eye on it to say who stood out or anything like that, but Cardiff are a threat. And I think there's an element to Cardiff this year where, because obviously the time of year where you play knockout rugby, that they could knock someone off if they get into the top 8. Like you could see them beating a Sharks, a Glasgow in a very entertaining, like 35-33 type game where you just give them enough opportunities. Maybe not the Bulls and Leinster because I think they'd physically overpower them a bit too much, but you could definitely see them having a claim. And I think that's the one thing about the Ospreys last year. They got to the quarterfinal, it was a big achievement. But when push came to shove and they went to Thomond Park, they just didn't have any answers. I think the same could happen for Cardiff, don't get me wrong, if they get into the top 8. But I can definitely see them in a position that they could rattle someone. And that's what you want to see. If you're going to have quarterfinals, which some people aren't in agreement with, you want to see teams, all 8 teams, being viable semi-finalists, please.
Yeah, the quarterfinals last season were a bit of a damp squib, weren't they? I think it was all home wins and none of the games were particularly competitive. Cardiff have a good record down against the Sharks. I feel like Harley would want me to mention. And also, I should say that the stat about Ospreys conceding 30 points 4 games in a row is also Harley's stats. I credited Nick for his comments, so I need to credit Harley. Otherwise, I'll get told off on Facebook Messenger. Right, the other game in Judgment Day was Dragon Scarlets. I'm not going to talk tons about this, partly because I've got to talk about it again in a little bit on the Scarlets pod, and partly because, look, it needed to be a bonus point win for the Scarlets, and it was. The Dragons put up a good fight. The Dragons have a good record against the Scarlets on Judgment Day. That we were saying, producer Lee was saying in the pub beforehand, Dragons turn up for 2 games a year. Ospreys at home, which they won, and Scarlets on Judgment Day, which they were leading for a lot of. Scarlets fans in the stadium were getting quite frustrated at this, to the point where when we scored our first try, people were sarcastically clapping. People were going, "Oh, finally, geez." So yeah, it wasn't. It wasn't the greatest game of rugby you've ever seen, and yeah, I think the Scarlets just got the job done. What I will say in the second half is Gareth Davis took control of the game at scrum half. He said, "Right, no, okay, we're doing this, and I'm not losing to the Dragons today." And what he did was he kicked 14 times in the game, and he kicked contestable. And that really worked for Blair Murray, who, since he's moved to fullback, has been probably the best attacking player in Wales. And Tommy Rogers, the effect that he can have a game out on the wing is greater than what a winger is supposed to have. Wingers are supposed to stand out there and dot the ball over the try line. But the impact he's able to have on a game is really impressive. So as a Scarlets fan, we won, hooray! And we've now won 9 games this season, where we only won 5 last season. So if we manage to get a 10th win, which is going to be a tall order, but if we do it, to have doubled up on wins compared to last season, I think is good progress for us. So I'm happy enough. There's not much else to say about this game. Like I said, it wasn't a classic. Okay, what should we talk about next? Let's talk about Edinburgh Sharks. So Ben's not here. Now, Ben will be back, don't worry. There's nothing wrong with him. He's just on holiday, apparently. So the Edinburgh versus Sharks. I know how Ben was feeling in the immediate aftermath, but Mohammed, as the Sharks fan, and your team did win, I'll let you go first.
You gotta love being a Sharks fan. This team keeps you on your toes. You lose a URC game to what's effectively the Leinster second, third, and sprinkling of first team in Durban. And then you go to you play a sort of a Challenge Cup game in France in between. But then you get a week off and you go to Scotland and you send just about your best team, maybe short one player, Dylan Richardson. And yeah, you get the result undeservedly, because the reality is that like Sharks are right now, they're fourth on the log. Hopefully they'll keep fourth. Um, and people often say that on paper the Sharks are the second best team in the tournament. But as
I
we
think
know,
they're the best
the
on paper. I'll get onto it in a minute.
the game is not played on paper, and I'm not going to put some A4 down or anything like that. People used to joke about that with the Bulls as well. Quite often they'd be like, "Can someone lay some A4 down at Loftus because the Bulls play better on paper?" But unfortunately, the Sharks um, seem to be quite consistently inconsistent. And just like we've got to give Connacht credit in the Stormers game, we've got to give Edinburgh credit as well. They move the ball around so well in the back line. They use their opportunities. They were understandably sort of thought of as being underdogs despite playing at home. But they made the most of it. They were obviously helped by inconsistencies from the Sharks, our captain consistently getting yellow cards when it's not really necessary. One could argue that, okay, Eben Etzebeth went off for yellow card, but his counterpart in Edinburgh also went off for yellow card, the other number four. But the thing is that the influence this guy has on the field, you just want to keep him on the field as much as possible in terms of like his leadership, but also in terms of like the amount of attention the opposition give him. So that wasn't ideal. You have to obviously also acknowledge Andre Estes and just consistently 9 out of 10 performances. I'm so glad this guy came back to the Sharks, having spent some time in England, playing for Harlequins, and he's evolved as a player. We've watched him come through the team, and often it's said that when Jake White was managing the Sharks, he wanted Andre Esterhuizen to move from being a backline player to being a flanker. But I'm so glad he didn't, because he is so, but he's effectively like a flanker, is so consistent. Lukhanyo had a few good moments, but you can clearly see he hasn't played competitive rugby in a while. And obviously Ethan Hooker sort of like saved our bacon towards the end of the game. One interesting thing is that the game might not have been played on paper, but it was played on a 4G pitch, and that is difficult on your ankles. And Apelele Fase came back from a serious ankle injury, which he got in Cape Town against the Stormers. So he went off late in the game with about 5 or 10 minutes left. And so hopefully he's ready for our next game in Ireland against Ulster, because our depth in terms of fly off and fullback are quite it's quite concerning. And shout out obviously to Oxen Chair with that excellent kick in the first half.
Yeah, I've heard about it. I haven't seen it, but I've heard loads of people talk about it. What should I go first? I know that Ben wasn't happy with this result and with this game, and he was particularly not happy with some of the antics of the Sharks, particularly like Mapimpi at the end and things. But I spoke to South African Alan about it in Cardiff, and he made the point that, look, rugby is a game where you've got to smash people, and rugby rewards the bad guys. Rugby is a game where if you are just the bigger bastards, you normally win. And Sharks are just a team that's willing to be the bastards. And arguably, that's what you would say about Scottish teams. Broadly, obviously, Glasgow being the reigning champions, but Scotland teams are a bit too nice.
Yeah.
So,
Glasgow are a good example, and one of the best, in my opinion, the best European team we've seen in the modern era was Saracens, and they were the biggest set of, B words. That is the great European rugby. It does work. You have to ruffle
La
some
Rochelle,
feathers.
complete bastards.
Yeah, and that's what cup rugby is about as well. Like, and even to use the game, like I'm not saying the Bulls were dirty. Like some of the clearouts at the weekend, like Bulls, Leinster, Glasgow are three of the most prolific, violent teams when it comes to breakdown entries. It's not necessarily always a bad thing. As long as everything is safe, it's not necessarily a bad thing. That's how you gain these 1% advantages.
Yeah.
There's very much risk reward in it, because if you push it too far, you could get too many people yellow carded. You could give away penalties in unideal situations. You could effectively just hand the team 3 points if they've got kickers that can kick even outside of in their half as well. So there's a balance to it, and the Sharks undeservedly won, but we'll obviously take the points, especially in terms of securing top four position, because it looks like we'll definitely get fourth. The only concern is like, who will we get in a quarterfinal in Durban, that kind of thing. I'm hoping a Welsh team, but I'll take any of them. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. But so, for my point on the Sharks is, and it's not a new conversation because it's what people have been saying about the Sharks all year. But my goodness me, redefining bare minimum. Like, if you gave any URC team, Oxen Shea, Eben Etzebeth, Sia Khaleesi, Grant Williams, and Andre Esterhazen, any URC team, every single URC team improves with those players. Even Leinster gets better with those players in them, and that's just five. You could argue that others should be in that list ahead of those. Like the squad that the Sharks have got, Toulouse would trade players with the Sharks if they could. And to play so badly at times, like that's one of the worst I've seen a team play and still win a game. Like it's just the expectations have to be so high of the Sharks. And look, I've said it all season that I can see them scraping fourth and then because it's double World Cup winning Springboks, they'll turn up in the playoffs and they'll sneak the title. I can see it happening. But my goodness me, like not a well coached team. Not a team that has strong processes, a strong culture, a strong way of going about their business on the pitch. Really living on the pedigree of their players beyond anything that's coming down from the coaching box, in my opinion.
Yeah. Look, Plumtree's copped a lot of criticism, both deserved and undeserved, over the last while. And then a few pods ago, you did obviously mention that we've won effectively the three tournaments that we've been involved in, or at least the three things you can win. So that being the Currie Cup, we won the Challenge Cup last season. We won the Currie Cup in between these two seasons, and obviously we won the South African Shield. But at the same time, they um like it makes sense to bring Plumtree back, but the results and sort of the inconsistencies are a concern because he went away, he had a break, he coached a bunch of different places, he gained a lot of more experience, and Plumtree was a experienced guy to begin with, someone who actually played for the Sharks as well. And because he's New Zealander, he's got sort of a different accent, a different way of thinking, and that type of thing. But like the Bulls that we mentioned earlier, in sort of like in the back of their minds thinking, who are we going to replace Jake White with? The Sharks might also be looking at Stonehouse, etc., just to like change things up. But what I think they'll probably do is allow Plumtree to run his contract out because the management's obviously cost conscious and they're going to see how this season plans out. But yeah, one key aspect though, which is sort of upset a lot of people, is the fact that Jaden Hendricks, though talented as he is, has been inconsistent and poor when starting in the last three games. But we don't really know if Grant Williams is fit enough to actually start. And the fact that behind the two of them, we've got very talented but extremely young Bradley Davids, who looked good in the Currie Cup, but yours is a step up. So everybody who's sort of like calling for Grant Williams to start, we don't have the insight into if he's actually physically able to. So we'll see what happens in the next few games. We've got another game on this tour. Then we go back, we get a bit of a break, and then we've got two games at home. Hopefully we can sort of build some momentum for the rest of the season.
Absolutely. Let's now talk about Benetton Lions. So another high-scoring game, another away, well, not another away win because Connacht lost, but an away win for a European team in South Africa, and kind of not a result that we saw coming. And is it fair to say, Mohammed, that maybe 42-31 flatters the Lions in a way?
Unfortunately, yes, I'm quite disappointed. I thought the Lions would put up more of a fight. I looked at the team that Benetton put out. They've sent quite a good, very talented team, which we will obviously see in Cape Town this weekend against the Stormers. So that should be exciting. But the Lions had pretty much, I remember this season, all their sort of exciting players are there. Renzo du Plessis on the bench, and he makes an incredible impact. JC Pretorius, who's obviously transitioned over from the Sevens rugby. It's almost like the new Quagga Smith type prototype. He was there. We have to sort of acknowledge the good performance of Darian Landsberg this season, and yet they just couldn't execute against a very focused Benetton team who've clearly come through to not just sort of rotate their players and stuff like that. Although I mean, Menicello and Brex, that's quite envious. But the Lions, they swapped out they fly off. They got Cade Volter back. He's been out for a while, so maybe he's maybe not that sharp. I had hoped that Nico Steyn would make more impact from the bench. Um, Johan Skuman, he left the Sharks, went overseas, gained a lot of experience at Bath. He's come back, played relatively well for the Lions. Um, yeah, this is indicative of the Lions just not being able to get any consistency, maybe because of injuries, but maybe also because their players are being picked off by sort of more wealthier unions and stuff. So yeah, disappointing from the Lions.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that Rian Lowe is going to be has been posting furiously about how furious he is, and I'm
Poor
sure
guy.
we'll be talking about it in his show as well. Um, yeah, I don't know. Caolan Benetton, kind of. We've said that they've been incredibly meh all season. We even called them fraud watch, I think, halfway through because of the riches available to them and not performing. We know their coach is leaving, but fifth on the log now and picked up a win down in South Africa, never to be sniffed at. Have they brought themselves back into the conversation for a decent enough season?
They absolutely have. I would recommend that anyone who didn't see our fraud watch video to absolutely go back because I'm sure we've got a lot of clangers in there. I feel like about three of the fucking teams that are going to end up that were on fraud watch are going to end up in the playoffs. But no, they're definitely thereabouts. I think it's a similar situation to last year where they're round 17 game, and I just pull it up here because I can't remember for the life of me who it is against. I know they have Munster in round 18. Round 17, they are up against 1 second now. This is not great for podcasting, but I have it here. So round 17, they're against Glasgow, which is it's an incredibly tricky finish. Stormers, Glasgow, Munster. But there's a chance that only one win will be enough to make into the last eight, which I feel like will be a objectively fine season, not necessarily kicking on. They can beat the Stormers, they can beat Glasgow, and they can beat Munster. They just need to show it. And I think this is the thing. It's like you're not surprised seeing that Benetton beat the Lions. You're not surprised when they beat certain teams. You are kind of a little bit not surprised. You would be surprised if they went on and defeated any of those last three teams that they have. The talent is there. The only concern is, as you kind of have alluded to in recent weeks, if Menoncello leaves, if other guys go, like, is this their last big great opportunity to make a Euro C quarterfinal? Obviously, I hope they don't make it at Munster or Ulster's expense. As an Irishman, I don't hope that, but we shall wait and see. You are on mute there, Hugh.
I hadn't started talking yet, so it wasn't a problem. So yeah, I completely agree with everything that you said, as I always do, and so should all the people in the comments. Um,
Is this
so
teeing up the next game we're going to talk about?
so Leinster versus Ulster. Look, right, okay. So there's not tons to say about this as a game. 41 points to 17. Uh, Another home win for Leinster, who are clearly the best team in the league. I always, every time you just think about Ulster, oh, could they? And then they don't. It just seems to be. I'm going to browse the stats on this one. Is it Caelan? Is too simple to say? No big stew, no party.
Definitely a factor. I've said this for quite some time. There are certain players that are more important to their province than the other guys, regardless of name value. And Stu is probably that guy for Ulster. He is just so important to them, and especially when Stuart Moore ends up going off injured as well. So their finishing centre pairing was Willem de Klerk, who was 20, and um Jude Postlethwaite, who was only 23. It was a very inexperienced centre pairing going up against Henshaw and Ringrose of all people. Leinster were good. Dan Sheehan's world class. Like, it feels like one of those things that it's taken as given now. Like, some players' world class status is not. His is. Tommy O'Brien's got a really nice try. Probably in a really weird way. Like, he's 27, and it feels like this is the first time we've actually get to see him go. Sorry, he's 27 in like 2 weeks' time. So 26 until he's 27 situation to relive the meme. but he's actually in really good form. But I do think the big difference for Leinster now compared to earlier in the season is their attack is finally clicking. It looks like a way more polished attack than what we seen last year, which was the last year of Andrew Goodman and the first year of Tyler Blendan. Now it looks a lot. It looks like he's got the most out of a lot of players, especially kind of that link in, that midfield access or, the back rows, for example. For Ulster, it's disappointing. I didn't expect them to win here. I expected them to put up a bit of a fight, which they did. It was still a game at half time. That's kind of what I was predicting. That's the try from Tommy O'Brien for anyone on YouTube. Definitely gets a fortuitous bounce away from Doak, but takes it really, really well. Really good speed. Will probably get Ireland capped in the summer, but as I said,
Are
a strange situation. He's
oh,
nearly
this
37.
coincidence. I didn't know I was going to show this, but yeah,
He's-
I didn't know I was going to show this, but it supports my point perfectly. Leicester seem to be doing a lot more kick passes now. That
Hmm,
seems to be a thing they've
very much
added
so.
in just the last few weeks is the kick pass.
They had it a lot under Lancaster. They would have went for a lot of crossfield kicks. It's something Ross Byrne is very good at. But since Blendown has come in, it seems to be something he's really enjoyed. And to be fair, like they have competent. It's the one thing that like Stuart Lancaster always said when he came to Ireland. He reckoned you could field a 23 of kickers who are better than some kickers out of hand in England who play out half. Like that's the level because of the GA background, the Gaelic football background. Leinster
Mm.
tend to be more of a Gaelic football background, with Dublin, but yeah, no, they are clicking at the right time, and that's you know, there was kind of a misnomer last week that I was almost saying that European rugby fell at the hands of Leinster. No, European rugby fell at the hands of EPCR, Leinster, and other teams have benefited from it. But they are at the point of the season now where you can park Ireland's, poor Six Nations, objectively poor Six Nations, Leinster, and their past failings in recent years, and now if you look at it, you look at Glasgow are not the team they were at exactly this moment last season. Likewise, Munster. Likewise, I think you'd argue Bulls, just because they've had so many injuries this season. I don't think they're in the same position they were, even if they could bounce back. Sharks are stronger. Toulouse aren't as strong. Northampton aren't as strong. Bordeaux are still very flaky. The double is there for Leinster. It's just about how the next few weeks pan out. And it's a big challenge, but ultimately we can't spend 15 weeks of a show going, God, Leinster are the best team in the league. Yeah, I agree. And then say, they might get to a final. Like it is there for them. But yeah, definitely have impressed me in recent weeks. And I did say this was the game I judged them on because Ulster would give them a fight. They did. They did actually uppercut Leinster a few times. The Izuchuku try is a great example. Niederbach will be tearing whatever amount of hair he has out after seeing, a guy breaking straight up the middle. But no, Leinster rebounded really well, and yeah, I think the takeaway, if anyone didn't see it, Dan Sheehan is world class. That's all you need to know.
He is indeed. Okay, we've had a question from Nick off the Ospreys Erie podcast, and he has wanted to know about the changes to the kind of finances and the funding in Ireland. Now, respecting the fact that you've already done a 45-minute podcast about this, and we're not going to talk about this in 45 minutes, can you just give us a greatest hits of what has changed and what the implications might be?
So originally okay, I could go back all the way to like 2004 with this. I won't. So really, the Cliff Notes version, there used to be like 20 to 25 central contracts spread evenly around Ireland. That was the buzz term everyone became familiar with. After 2014, it got limited to about 14 or 15, typically guys who were guaranteed first 23. At the time, Sexton, Heaslip, Sean O'Brien, Rory Best, guys like that. And as time has gone on, it has actually gone down. The amounts, because player contracts have gone up. Anyone who tells you otherwise is lying. This is natural in life, in the world. As player contracts have gone up, the amount of central contracts has gone down. David Nucifora was in place in 2014 when the split was something like, I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was something like 4 Ulster, 5 Munster, and like 6 Leinster or something like that at the time. It was a pretty good split despite Leinster's dominance. They definitely had more though, maybe two or three more than that. And now you're in a situation where it's like 11 Leinster, none for Ulster, two Connacht and one Munster. So David, to be fair, there are if you notice this in advance because you have to notice things in advance. You can't just change things overnight with contracts. And what they wanted to implement was a new look system. So the first thing that they did under David Humphreys' tenure, his first big move was from now on, the original press release was from now on, central contracted players, the province will have to pay up to 30% per central contracted player. So Leinster, for example, on their 11 players, could be paying, for example, 30% on Andrew Porter's contract, 15% of James Ryan's, and so on and so forth, give or take, whatever they come to an agreement on. That was then clarified in this week's press release, in which they said it's going to raise from a minimum of 30% payment to a minimum of 40% payment. And the big focal point out of it was the money that has been used, that the provincial money that they pay towards a central contract, so a bit essentially paying the IRFU for this player, will go into the pathways at Munster, Ulster, and Connacht. The way they see this is, and I know Hugh, you've done a video on, the Leinster pathway system. Leinster are incredibly fortunate because they don't have to pay for 12 sub-academies, essentially, because they are fee-paying schools who are producing a lot of these players. Blackrock and St. Michael's have been probably the biggest supplier of the lot over the last 10 years in Leinster and across Ireland, to be fair, to their credit. So now what we're going to look at from 2026, from August 2026, every player who's essentially contracted, the province will pay a guaranteed 40% of that contract. So say on a €500,000 contract, that is, God, I shouldn't have done the maths live because I'm good at maths. I've just had a brain fog. That's 200,000, right? That's your set amount that they will pay, and that money will be redistributed on each and every contract towards the different provinces. So the HPU that's being built in Cork, that'll be one example. Probably more club and community officers in Munster. Probably look at the club game in Ulster, which used to be a lot stronger for production than it is now. Ulster fans can correct me if I'm wrong there. That's the perception I've been told. And that's how they're just trying to rebalance things, because it was seen by David Humphreys and others in the RFU that we can't keep shaking the Leinster tree and expecting them to, and it's not expecting them to do it, but it's our job as a union. Like, union is the key word, as a union, to bring, to rise all boats. And especially you look at this year, where last year Ulster made a late push for top six. Munster were top, Leinster had a home quarter final. The year before, Ulster had a home quarter final, and Munster finished fifth. This year, it'll be one Irish team with a home quarter final in the URC. These changes are needed. They will take time because that's just the way it is with contracts. You can't do these things overnight, but it's definitely a step forward. As you said, I have spoken about it with someone who's a lot better at explaining these things. If Nick or anyone else wants to go check it out, but that is the general gist. So basically, from now on, your Tyke Burns, Tyke Furlongs, James Gibson Park, even though that was never announced, Joe McCarthy, Bundyaki, province will pay 40% of that contract, and the IRFU will use that. But they would use that money and circulate it and use it towards player pathways, and possibly in the women's game as well. That is unknown, but I do have a feeling, because of everything we've heard in the last year or so, that some of that will go into the women's game as well.
Do you feel this will have a long-term positive effect on the game in Ireland?
Absolutely. The big issue with the game in Ireland is it's hard for example, Munster and Connacht to raise the same level of money for rugby as they do for GA, where GA strongholds, you look at, say, Mayo, where Castlebar, where the Connacht Munster game was played, it's Gaelic football heaven. It's everything there is Gaelic football. It's hard to find the same level of money that ultimately fee-paying schools are going to have more money, but that's a political podcast that we won't do this week. But I do think it's a net positive. As always, these things will take time. They will cause a little bit of strain for the provinces, but ultimately Munster, Connacht, and Ulster have had their belts tightened probably too much over the last few years, especially in like 2022, 2023, where they look to be back on their feet. So I think moves like this will help them. And there's kind of that, the RFU will be giving back as opposed to just your set. It used to be a case of we give you 8 million, we give you 8 million, we give you 8 million, and done. But now it looks like, okay, we're going to have a bit of flexibility. And flexibility is a good thing because no two things are the same in sport.
Fantastic. Thank you for explaining that, mate. So the last game that we need to talk about is Zebra versus Glasgow. Now, not tons to say about this one. 6 points to 14, an expected win for the Warriors. Zebra managing to put up a fight, 6-0 at half time, but Glasgow just about getting over the line. Very after the Lord Mayor showed this one for Glasgow after what happened to the Mayor in Dublin. I don't think I'm going to throw to the lads on this one, to be honest. I don't think Glasgow fans will be too angry at me for not dwelling on this game much. Just an expected win that they needed to get. Managed to get a couple of tries. Look, in past lives, that they would have thought, no, we have to get a bonus point win away to Zebra, but I think after what happened in Dublin, they just needed almost like a week off here. There was obviously a bit of rotation and got the job done. Zebra's incredibly respectable season goes on, fair play to them, but yeah, this one's last on the running order for a reason. So, Caolan, as we do, quickly touching on Women's Six Nations very quickly. Italy gave France a bit of a scare.
Yeah, I think Italy are the unsung heroes of this Six Nations. I think they are what we thought Scotland would be, where they'd kick on and they'd have those home games and they kick on from there. Give France France don't look overly impressive. They will probably get a bit of a beating of England next week if England turn up, to be honest. A good performance from Italy. I only caught the highlights of this, but a really good performance. And then obviously elsewhere, Ireland, Wales. That was, look, maybe you want to touch on this for a second, but one of Ireland's better performances results wise, but probably not their best performances on field, which is really impressive. Stats wise, loads of carries, very few tackles, but they also had 25 handling errors. They had so many chances that they squandered, one or two directly in front of the line and put up 40 points and 6 tries in Rodney Parade, which is, again, a step in the right direction. Big game for Ireland next week. They don't need to win to guarantee third spot in the Six Nations, which was their aim, but a win could see them finish closer to France than they would to fourth place, which I think would be a real statement of intent.
Absolutely. From a Wales point of view, look, it's another game it's the second game in 2 weeks where we've taken 40 points, and I'm left saying that doesn't reflect the game. What Sean Lynn is trying to do, and I'm fully behind Sean Lynn. Everything that I've seen from him, everything I've heard him speak, I'm like, yeah, you're the correct man for this job. You are going to achieve what you're putting your mind to here. But he's really trying to turn around an oil tanker at the moment. And last Six Nations, we saw Ireland overtake Wales emphatically when we saw Wales go backwards. And then over the last 12 months, we've seen Ireland pull away from Wales. And look, what Wales are trying to do now is play with a lot more aggression, and they're bringing that to all facets of their game. And they're just not able to play that for 80 minutes, and they do fall away in the final 20. And look, I think we're missing Cecilia Tuipulotu significantly. Like we see the impacts that these top level tight heads have at international level. Not having that, look, Jenny Scoble's done a fantastic job, but in the loose, she doesn't bring what Cecilia is able to bring, unfortunately. And without going on about it too much, I think some of the Welsh players, particularly Alex Callender, felt very aggrieved by some of the refereeing calls in this game. Particularly at the breakdown, Sean Lynn made no secret of the fact the breakdown was being targeted, especially with Erin King being out. There was an opportunity there, and he's picked 3 open sides in the back row to go after the breakdown. And the referee has not taken kindly to what Wales were trying to do. And I think maybe another referee on another day with a different interpretation, the game has a different flow to it. Maybe not a different result, but a different feel. So yeah, big frustration. And now there's
it's probably like the under 26 nations where, rightly or wrongly, depending on your opinion, it's kind of a breeding ground into international rugby for referees. Now, obviously, you've got your Holly Davisons, your Bertrans, who need no introduction, especially as URC fans. But I did find it was very whistle happy at the start and then very free for all. And look, I can't remember the referee's name off the top of my head. They will learn from it. That's just the nature of it. You have to have howlers at international level. Not even a howler. Sorry, that's way too strong. You have to have games like this at international level where you find your feel and find what works for you. And it did play into Ireland's hands. No, I absolutely like the I didn't mention Aoife Wafer yet, but we can include her here. Her video game numbers are absolutely helped by the fact that Ireland were the more dominant team in midfield and in close quarters. Sean Lynn will probably be disappointed, and Wales will probably be disappointed that they did lose an awful lot of collisions. But at the same time, there is that knock-on effect there when they went to be probably a little bit more passive in defense to be more offensive at the breakdown, and that didn't work. And then you're on the back foot then.
Yeah, completely. And then Scotland, just very disappointing this Six Nations. Just look, you're not expecting them to beat the Red Roses. 59 points to 7 was the end result. You're never going to react too much to a game against them, but a team that's not kicked on in the way that they probably should with the squad that they've got.
No, I agree, and it's a pity for Scotland because I had high hopes for them coming into this. I thought we would see a battle for third spot in the table next weekend in Murrayfield. Now it still is technically they can still finish ahead of Ireland mathematically, but very unlikely with the points difference of like 90 points in the points difference wise. But disappointing for me because to get the fantasy rugby shout in there. The week that I captained Abby Dow over Ellie Kildun scored tries, and the week that I captained Ellie Kildun, Abby Dow scored tries.
Yeah,
So
that's par for the course for the fantasy league. Yeah.
absolutely, it was the way it is, especially with me.
Okay, brilliant. That's the end of the Women's Six Nations chat. Let's now preview not the round of 16, but round 16 of the URC. Starting off, the biggest game of the round, comfortably, Glasgow Warriors versus the Bulls, second versus third, a game that Jake White has made no secret of the fact that he is targeting. Mohammed, where do you see this one going?
Weirdly, I can't actually see the Bulls winning because when they go on tour, they swap alternate games. So it's been win, lose, win, lose. So I think that's going to be a loss because Glasgow will rotate the quality players back in. Carl Steyn will obviously, and this is a replay of last year's final. So the atmosphere should be great. Yeah, I'm going for Glasgow on this one. I hope the Bulls win, but yeah, you got to go logically.
Ooh, I'm not sure I agree. I think the Bulls. Cardiff versus Munster. Caolan, I can tell you that Cardiff will be well up for this.
Yeah, as I kind of said to you last week, it's something very Munster coded that their next game would be against like a team who would have been wound up. They weren't going to be, but Cardiff going to be well up for this. This feels like a shootout for maybe sixth place come the end of it. Obviously, Cardiff have to go down to South Africa, so that could change. Whoever loses this is going to be outside the top eight come Saturday morning, and that is the big concern because yes, Munster have two home games and Cardiff have two away games. You are just that little bit concerned. You don't want to be on the outside looking in heading into May. So big game. Hopefully from Munster perspective, not too many players minutes managed. And because I am a Munster fan who's seen this game 100 times, I fully expect Ray Lilo and Willis Halaholo to be starting in the centre and scoring tries because that's what's happened for 10 years now.
Well, Willis Howard doesn't play for Cardiff anymore, but I'm sure if there's a way, if there's a will, there's a way.
If there's a will, there's a way. Exactly.
If Cardiff do manage to get this, because obviously they're going down to South Africa after this, if Cardiff do manage to get this win, then they are looking set for a playoff position, which would be a fantastic result for them. Lions against Connacht. Mohammed, look, after the game that Connacht gave the Stormers and the tough day that the Lions had, the Lions are just waiting for the season to be over at this point.
Yeah, it looks like they're trying to go on holiday already. I hope they actually pitch up. Connacht, to their credit, really stuck in there against the Stormers. So this is the definition of a coin toss. I wish Connacht all the best, but I really hope the Lions actually sort of get a bit more focus, maybe regroup. Statistically, if I look at the log, can the Lions still make top four? Yeah, it's a long shot.
I think it's
But
basically no.
yeah. Yeah, so Lions need to refocus and sort of like play to get a Sharks contract. That seems to be how it works.
Oh dear. Oh
Yeah.
dear. Oh dear.
Shout out to Edwin van der Merwe. Yeah, look forward to seeing him playing in black next season. Yeah.
As they'll excite people. Caolan, are Connacht favourites for this?
I wouldn't say so just with the squad that they've sent down, as we kind of alluded to earlier. I would have the Lions as favourites. But it's a weird one. Like it still feels like the Lions are they're thereabouts and could well sneak into top eight because they've got all home games remaining.
Mm.
They just lost to Benetton at home. Do you know what I mean? Which is the frustrating part for them. I can see Connacht getting a result. The Lions win would weirdly be more fun for the league because they have those home games and they will make a run at top eight then. But they're kind of two teams that you can't really trust until about 10 minutes after the full-time whistle.
Yeah, I could completely agree. Ospreys versus Dragons I'm sorry, Dragons, one win all season, bottom of the league. You're always going to be the team that I predicted to lose. Ospreys, wow, found themselves in 13th. That's not the trajectory they were on a couple of weeks ago, but they should get a bonus point win in this one. Not much else to say about that. Hopefully, Justin Tipuric is back fit because this could be his last game certainly in Wales before he moves into coaching next season. So fingers crossed on that one. Stormers against Benetton. Now, we might not have focused too much on this game a couple of weeks ago, but based on what happened last week, Mohammed, this is an exciting one now.
This one's going to be incredible. I expect a high-scoring game, not just because the Stormers were poor at defending this past weekend. I'm sure they'll clean that up a bit. But both teams are willing to sort of throw the ball around a bit. Benetton are very good at gamesmanship as well. I mean, they last season they came through to Durban and then they used sort of front row replacements and people getting injured and sort of delaying the game quite well. So they are incredibly good at sort of going into sort of the opposition's stadium and sort of making the most of their opportunities. I suspect because this long weekend was like the Easter weekend, so a lot of people go away in Cape Town, they go camping, so forth. I suspect the Stormers will actually get a bigger crowd this weekend because those people will have come back, and the fact that the Stormers are building a bit more momentum. Yeah, I'm going Stormers though. Benetton a good team, but the Stormers are marching into top eight. They're already in top eight right now, but we need to sort of secure that position. Obviously, I want as many teams from South Africa in the top eight, and it looks like it's just going to be Sharks, Bulls, and Stormers.
Absolutely. Scarlets versus Leinster. Look, again, a bit like with the Dragons, I'm always going to predict Leinster to win. And the question is what kind of team they're going to send over. I would expect they're going to send what do we call them now? The Max Deegan All Stars?
I believe that's the ironic term that was given to them, yeah. But to be fair, Max Deegan is breaking into the first 23 now, so I think it's more, who's a
Kean
good
Frawley All Stars.
Frawley, maybe, or the Luke McGrath All-Stars, maybe.
Ooh, maybe. But from a Scarlets point of view, last home game of the season. Let's just get down the park. What is it? It's a 5:15 evening kickoff in Llanelli. And it's one of those games where you can make a statement. And I can really see Josh McLeod, the Scarlets captain, being up for this and giving the team talk of like, let's get into the head space where we were when we beat the Bulls at the start of the season and just say, no, this is our turf. We're not going to roll over for you. The Scarlets, the only game that they've kind of not been in so far this season in the league is Munster away. Every other game that they've played, they've been competitive in. And it needs to be a kind of this is our patch. You need to earn a win over us. So, and look, we're ninth, but it's still a bit of a Hail Mary for us to get into the top eight. But think of the risk versus reward. If we manage to get anything out of this game, the feeling off the back of that, it's well worth putting everything into. Got a week off the week after it. Let's just go for it, boys. Let's just go for it. You know, why do you play the game? This is why you play the game. So Leinster to win. And then finally, not finally, there's two more. Ulster versus Sharks. I don't know. I don't know. You guys tell me. I don't know which way to call this one.
I'd go Sharks, to be honest. I think Ulster just their season feels like it's petering out, unfortunately. If they get fully fit, maybe. Werner Koch back in there potentially. But yeah, I feel like unfortunately, I feel like this will go the way of the Sharks. Sorry, Mount.
Yeah, there's so many variables. It's tough to call. I hope the Sharks win. I think Ulster will be a similar challenge to Edinburgh. Yeah, look, we know which Sharks teams sort of which players they've sent on tour because they've announced a touring team. So they probably shuffle the pack a little. Hopefully, Lele Fase can play again because he was key. He looked a bit rusty this week, having not played that much. I'd still bit annoying that they didn't let him take certain kicks with his left foot to find more distance than what Jordan Hendrickse was able to find. If Jaden Hendrickse does start, I hope he plays much better. I am hoping Sharks win, but I wouldn't be surprised to see an Ulster win.
That sounds very reasonable to me. And finally, Zebra versus Edinburgh. Is this the one to just keep a cheeky eye on whilst you're doing something else on Saturday evening, 7:30 kickoff? Just going to check the Zebra Edinburgh score, see if something might have happened, because this seems like a game where something might happen.
Yeah, like I would give Zebra a good chance. Obviously, they've beaten Edinburgh already this season.
Yeah, do the double. Imagine.
So yeah, go do the double. I think Edinburgh, to be fair, they look locked in for top six. Like they really should have gotten with it last week. They turned over Munster. They had a win over someone else as well. Was it Ulster they beat? I can't remember 100%. So yeah, they look locked in, but there's a banana skin to Zebra that there isn't for, like of the Dragons, who I don't want to be punching down on.
Okay, fair enough. Well, sorry, Mohammed, did you want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, I think we have to admire the way Zebra have sort of rebuilt. Many of us didn't give them much of a chance this season. We thought it would be like loss after loss. I've given them a shout out for actually using a very clever tactic when they played in Durban, and then the Sharks just sort of playing into it, that type of thing. So that was as much the Sharks being naive as Zebra sort of playing their game. So good for them. With Benetton sort of having to regroup next season, maybe we'll see a resurgent Zebra. Yeah.
We can only hope. We can only hope for, if we have any Italian. If you are Italian and you watch this, comment below. And we're sorry if we don't do you enough justice. We do try our best. Okay, that brings us to an end of the show. That leaves for me to say only thank you to New Muhammed and that Caolan.
Thank you very much.
And thank you to
Hey, guys.
everybody for watching / listening. Enjoy the rugby, and I hope everybody's team wins. Cheers.
That was the United Rugby Rewind. Please rate, review and share us on socials if you can, and join us next week for more of the same. And until then, enjoy your rugby.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.